Back here on Southeastern 16, talking SEC football. We're going to talk some Tennessee football today as they are in the midst of spring practice. And we're going to do that with Ryan Sylvia, volreport.com. They're part of the Rivals group. And Ryan, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. It's the busiest but most fun time of the year. You got baseball action. We're at the basketball arena right now before a practice, and obviously spring practice for football. So it's been a fun time with all the teams doing well at Tennessee too. So it's been fun to cover.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking spring football, look, made the playoffs this past year, lost there in the opening round. But just as you look now to the spring, you look at the 2025 season, coming off of a playoff season, first year of the 12-team playoff expanded berth, do you feel like that puts added pressure on this team for 2025 coming off of a playoff berth?
Yeah, I think in a way you could say that. Like the expectation has definitely now been set that this is a team that should make the playoffs, and uh, I think that's fair though. Like you look at the roster and you look at who's on top of it with Nico Iamaleava, a former five-star who's coming off of a nice year, and there's an expectation he takes a step in the right direction. But at the same time, there are pieces that you lose. Like you lose Dylan Sampson, who was one of the best players in the country last year. You lose a lot of what you had at wide receiver, and now there's some unproven pieces that are going to have to step up and take a step, which they're capable of, but you still have to see it. And that's the same thing on the offensive line as well, where you lose four of your five starters on the offensive line, and they have the guys that they feel like are capable of stepping up and being what they need and helping Yamaleava to run this offense. But it's the same thing as wide receiver room. Like you just haven't seen them do it at the SEC level yet. So there are question marks around the roster. There's question marks on the depth chart, and there's going to be some internal battles to see who kind of wins different spots. But I do think that the expectation has definitely been set that like, hey, every year under Josh Heupel in a 12-team expanded playoff, you would expect them to be in it. And if they're not, you don't want to say it's a disappointing year, but it's definitely not a year that fans will be happy with.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to the running back room, because obviously, again, losing Dylan Sampson's huge. He was tremendous for the Vols. So much fun to watch. What do you know right now heading into spring as far as the running back room goes for the Vols?
Yeah, I think that running back is probably one of the most open competitions on the roster. It's probably going to be one of those three-headed monsters like we saw in 2023 when it was Dylan Sampson as a sophomore, and then you think of Jalen Wright, who had that really good year, and Jabari Small, who came in and played his role. And this year, you have two returners in a Peyton Lewis, who's going into his sophomore season, and then Deshaun Bishop, who's going to his redshirt sophomore season. Those are two guys that played a good amount of football last year behind Dylan Sampson. And it kind of started as Deshaun Bishop, and then he went down with injury, and then Peyton Lewis really stepped up and played a nice role for Tennessee. But they also bring in a guy, Star Thomas, a Duke transfer, one of the JUCO guys who's getting that extra year of eligibility because of the Diego Pavia ruling. And he's expected to play a role as well. So I'm interested to see if anyone steps up and is like, yeah, that's the guy, that's the starter, or if it really will be just a complete by committee. Like you get all three of those guys and they all get 50 yards, and all of a sudden that's an 150-yard rushing game, and you can work with that. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But they definitely have options, as well as two true freshmen in Dewan Morris and Justin Baker, who could come in, and feels like running backs one of the easier positions to get in early in your career, make an impact as a true freshman. So maybe one of those guys can get in and make an impact too.
I thought we saw Nico run a lot more as the season went on. We saw his run game elevate, him be utilized more that way. Do you feel like that will be the case going into this season, that we see a lot more of him running, whether it's by design or just kind of the way things fall? We see Nico use his legs more.
They like his legs. Like they feel like he could be a really good runner, and he doesn't have to be like a run first quarterback or anything like that. But it definitely gives Tennessee a dimension that I think is really helpful. And like you said, whether that is a designed run, which we saw at times, or whether that's just him making something happen when plays break down, that's a big deal for Tennessee. And I think the layer on top of that we could see this year is more escaping the pocket with your legs, extending that play, but then delivering a pass off of that and looking downfield. And he was able to do that last year and early in his career, but I think that could be something that really becomes like a lethal aspect of his game, is just being a guy that, like, you think about a lot of those previous Heisman winners and their Heisman moments and things like that, like a Bryce Young or Jaden Daniels, and it's when that pocket breaks down and they're able to create something out of nothing. And I think that's maybe something we could see from Nico this year that lets him take a step from, like, hey, that's a good SEC quarterback, to like, that's an elite SEC quarterback, is being able to use his legs not only to get down the field, but also to just, make something out of nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as receivers go, how do you feel like this receiver room is? Is there a guy that's really standing out in spring so far? What do you know about that room?
It's a thin group. Like, they really have their guys at the top, and then it gets kind of sketchy when you go past that, just with unproven guys. On the outside, it'll be Chris Brazzell, who returns, and he made that big catch against Alabama to win the game in that back corner of the end zone. But the guy that they're really relying on the outside, I think, to take a huge step and maybe be that number one guy, is Mike Matthews, former 5-star. That he was someone that entered or said he planned to enter the portal for a couple of days, and then decided Tennessee was the best fit for him and decided to stay. And he's looked really good at spring ball. Like, he's looked the billing of a former 5-star. He's, we can only see so much against actual defenses, but in the periods we did, like, he was mossing guys. Like, he was going up and he was grabbing contested catches. And we talked to him yesterday after their practice as well. And he was talking about all the little things that are kind of starting to add up, the route running, the techniques, the things like that. And he said he wants to be a guy that, there's no second thought about when Nico's in the pocket and he needs to get rid of a ball. Like, he doesn't want there to be a second thought about giving the ball to Mike Matthews. So he's someone that's going to have to take a big step, but also Braylon Staley in the slot. I mean, he played a little bit last year, but he's going into his, I think he'll be a redshirt freshman. I don't think he hit the mark to lose his eligibility or that 1 year of eligibility. And he's the guy to look for in the slot. And so that's another guy that's not really played a lot of SEC football, but he's going to have to step up in a big way. And then behind them, you have Amari Jefferson, Alabama transfer, who's a redshirt freshman. You have Travis Smith Jr., Darius Jackson, 2 4-star freshmen. But, like, I mean, those are the definition of guys that have not done it at this level yet. So it's thin. They've got some talent there, but I'm curious to see kind of who steps up. And I think it'll be interesting too. Last year was really the first year we saw Tennessee go to 12 personnel and start to, pull the slot off the field and go to 2 tight ends with the inexperience in the slot. Like, I think Braylon Staley's a really good player, could have a good year. I'm curious to see if we see more 12 personnel. You get Ethan Davis in there next to Miles Kitselman, get that 2 tight end look, and then maybe that helps you if you're not getting exactly what you want out of the receiver position at times.
Yeah, interesting stuff there. Moving over to the defensive side, what's kind of the priority defensively this spring for the Vols?
I think it's similar to that wide receiver room and the running back room. Like, they're just trying to see at different spots who's going to step up. And I think the defense is more, I don't want to say in stone, but an easier side of the ball to look at and see where people are going to be starting. Like, you return Dominic Bailey and Tyree West at defensive end, who had fantastic years and have been great in their careers. And now that's I think a 6th-year senior for Dominic Bailey and then a true senior for Tyree West. So you have experience there. On the other side, the Leo position, which is where James Pierce and Byron Young were so good for Tennessee, you have returners and a guy like Josh Josephs and Caleb Herring and a Jordan Ross who could take a big step in year 2. Defensive tackles a little bit thinner. That's where I think more question marks come in. Like, Bryson Eason returns. That's a big deal. David Hobbs coming into his junior year. Jackson Moy, his 2nd year with Tennessee. So you have some pieces there, but it's not going to be as deep as it was last year, where they were rotating like 6 or 7 guys on the interior for those 2 spots. And it was really a strength. Linebacker is a similar situation where I think you have to really like the 2 guys at the top in that 2 linebacker scheme with Jeremiah Thielander and Arian Carter. Behind them, with the guys they lost to the portal and eligibility, it's going to be more young guys they have to rely on. Edwin Spillman, a redshirt freshman. Jordan Burns, a redshirt freshman. You have some true freshmen coming in that are going to have to step up and make plays as well. And then in the secondary, it's a little thinner right now because Jermod McCoy's recovering from a knee injury. He says he should be probably good to go by the time fall camp starts, or at least the time the season starts. But we'll see. I guess if he's 100% or where he's at the start of the season. But so that gives you a little bit of an opening at cornerback. But back at safety, you return Andre Turrentine, who was great last year. You have a couple other returners and a guy like Jacoby Thomas, and then a young guy like Idris Farouk who could step in play some big role. And then Boo Carter at the star of the nickelback position is on track to have a big sophomore jump as well. We'll see what happens at cornerback, though, because Ricky Gibson's another guy where right before spring camp started, he said, after this window, after spring ball, I plan to enter the transfer portal. Well, he's been at spring practice, and all signs kind of point right now that he'll stay at Tennessee, but that's still something that lingers. And if he is someone that decides he wants to hit the portal in that spring window, that's going to be another position Tennessee's going to have to address. I think their secondary is one of their deeper spots on the team, so they'd be fine. But Ricky Gibson's a really good player, and I don't think that's someone that they'd want to lose.
Overall, how's the health of the team this spring?
It's what you expect. Like you go out to the practice field, and there's a lot of red jerseys and non-contact guys, and there's guys. I mentioned Jermod McCoy is a guy who's missing spring camp, and so you walk out and he's on the bike and doing kind of different things with trainers, and so there's a good number of guys that are limited on some days and then back the next day, and a different group of guys that haven't really gotten any work in. But overall, I think you have to be pleased. Like, there's nothing super serious long term. We saw Jordan Thomas, another guy in the secondary who could either play the start position or safety a year ago, where he tore his ACL in his off season. At this point was when that happened. So I think you have to be mostly happy with the lack of long-term injuries Tennessee's dealing with right now. There's always going to be kind of nicks and bruises and guys held out, but overall, it's not anything that I think should be a concern for Tennessee, at least at this point. But it's one of those things you have to knock on wood and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Spring games have been a big talk across the country. What do you know about Tennessee? What are they going to be doing as far as spring game goes?
This year they're having it. Josh Heupel was asked about what maybe the future of the spring game is. He said he really likes the spring game, and it's something that with a big stadium and you get freshmen in, and it's not necessarily something that they've experienced playing in a stadium like Neyland, that he likes to get their toes wet a little bit with it. And it's not 100,000 fans, and you're not playing an opponent where you get a lot on third down necessarily, but it's still a different feeling to play in front of people in Neyland Stadium. And he likes the history of the spring game and all of that. And, so we'll see how much of that, I guess, is true, like how much of it's coach talk and how much of it is truly what he believes. But as of now, all signs point towards what he said, that they're going to keep the spring game around. We'll see what exactly it looks like under Heupel. It hasn't been the most exciting thing. Like, you look at what Ole Miss does, and they try to put some different things here and there and make it fun. Tennessee's spring game isn't the most fun. It's just a scrimmage, and that's fun in its own right. Like, you get to see the new guys, and it's interesting, but for the fan experience, it's not the greatest thing. So we'll see what tweaks there are, if any. If maybe if Deion's thing catches on and they want to start playing some other local team, or bring someone in or go on the road, I'm interested to see what that could look like as well. But as of right now, everything's kind of on track to stay how it's been for the orange and white game.
All right. Well, looking forward to that and seeing what Tennessee will be like in 2025. Ryan Sylvia covers the Vols, volreport.com. What can folks expect when they look on there at volreport.com this time of the year?
It's really everything. We have coverage on the number one baseball team in the country. They just beat Queens yesterday, and they're gearing up for another road trip out to South Carolina. Men's and women's basketball, both in the Sweet 16. So we'll have coverage on what both those teams are doing. And then, of course, football, as we just talked about, everything spring football you need to know Tennessee. And then on the recruiting side as well, basketball got a commit yesterday. So really, we like to say everything Tennessee athletics, we have you covered over at Vol Report.
Good stuff there, Ryan. Appreciate your time today. We'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Chase.
We are Southeastern 16. We got you covered. SEC football, basketball, baseball year around, and we'll be back with more SEC football talk coming up soon.